This is Channel 9 Eyewitness News at 10. Coverage you can count on.
Cuba's fight for freedom continues tonight with massive crowds marching on the island and people across Central Florida showing their support. And as the rallies march on, the fate of the Cuban people and their families in Florida is becoming a serious political issue. A bloodbath. People and their relatives in Central Florida are saying enough is enough. Good evening. I'm Greg Warman.
And I'm Martha Sigalski. It's clear tonight that these rallies aren't going away anytime soon. This was the scene this evening as dozens of protesters rallied along Cimarron Boulevard near the 434 in Altamont Springs. Many of them were holding signs and Cuban flags and U.S. flags, as well as signs that read SOS Cuba and Patria y Vida, or Homeland and Life. Some law enforcement officers were on hand to make sure traffic wasn't impacted tonight.
And a small group of protesters also gathered in Osceola County tonight. The group rallied outside of Sedano's, a grocery store in Kissimmee. They were also holding up Cuban flags and holding signs that read "Genocide in Cuba."
And this crowd of about 12 to 15 people rallied for Cuba not far from Orlando International Airport today. The group held Cuban flags outside of Florida Army National Guard base along Detweiler Drive. The protesters say their family and friends are suffering right now and want the U.S. government to do something.
I think they should do something, you know, because, we're going through a lot. We're going through a lot and we're just asking for help. That's all we need. We need some help.
Passing cars honked to show support for that rally and its message.
These scenes have been playing out all across Central Florida for 4 days now. And Channel 9's Alexa Lorenzo is live in Orlando. Alexa, those crowds were out there for several hours today.
Greg, the majority of people that have been rallying here in Orlando are Cuban Americans. Their families fled the island years ago for the freedom that comes with living in the United States. So for the past 4 days, they have stood on American soil, calling on American politicians to do more for the crisis in Cuba. Cubans have reached a breaking point. Hunger, health, anxiety, and anger have spilled over into one another, opening the floodgates of decades-long oppression and emotion.
This is something that was spontaneous. We've never seen that.
Dr. Luis Martínez-Fernández was born in Havana, a history professor now at UCF. He knows well what's playing out on the island.
What the government does is it unleashes these violent fanatics to beat up Cubans who are basically asking for a universal right to protest peacefully.
The communist government has arrested hundreds of protesters, restricted internet access in Cuba, showing you the dictatorship that has dominated for decades.
I think this is the beginning of a movement in which Cubans have said, enough is enough.
But the question is, what's next here, and what is the U.S. government doing about it?
Where are all these people that promise about human rights? Meanwhile, 90 miles from our coastline, human rights get trampled on every day.
That's why Cuban Americans in Florida, like Alberto Sarmiento, are protesting. His father and grandparents fled for freedom, and he wants American politicians to do more to protect the people on the island.
We need action in Cuba now.
U.S. Senator Marco Rubio, a Cuban American, has been a staunch opponent of the Cuban government, taking to social media and writing a letter to President Joe Biden, giving him 6 steps to take.
A horrific bloodbath is what awaits if action is not taken and something like that does not happen.
Here in Florida, you have Senator Marco Rubio, Congresswoman Val Demings vying for his seat. What do you think this unrest in Cuba will do for that campaign?
Well, it strengthens the Republican side. Val Demings has the opportunity to make public expressions about this.
Congresswoman Val Demings released a statement Monday and today on Twitter added, quote, "I stand with the people of Cuba and will continue to fight for their safety, liberty, and ability to freely choose their own futures. But as cliche as the saying may be, actions speak louder than words, and that's what protesters in Florida want from American politicians."
They say it every time they campaign. Now's the time to act. If they don't act, what do we stand for anymore?
The Biden administration is dealing with China, Russia, Iran. The plate is full. What I would like to see is a little slice of that plate dedicated to Cuba.
I reached out to Senator Rubio's team as well as Congresswoman Deming's team for an interview on what they plan to do to answer to these calls of action to address that crisis in Cuba. Their teams said neither of them were available this week. Tonight, Congressman Rubio did send a follow-up letter to President Biden urging that he take satellite internet to the island immediately. President Biden has not responded. Reporting live in Orlando, I'm Alexa Lorenzo for Channel 9 Eyewitness News.